Hello, this is Ron Climer again from Ormond Beach, Florida. I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams Realty here in Daytona. And today I'd like to talk to you about negotiation, because I think you'll agree with me that in our American culture, we don't negotiate every day. It's just not something that we do. You don't go to the store and say, oh, I see you want $100 for that item, will you take 85? We just don't do that. We do it sometimes. And one of the times that we do it, whether we like it or not, is when we buy and sell real estate. And usually there's a reason for that. But now let me say this. And I'm a real estate agent, and obviously I believe in real estate agents. And I will tell you this, I'm doing these videos, basically if you have your house for sale on your own, these tips will help you. But I do have to give you one little caveat if that's you. Direct negotiation is always buyer advantageous, no matter what you're selling. So, and if you ever notice when you go buy a car, you're talking to the car salesman, but he's never the final authority. He's got to check with the sales manager, who's got to check with the general manager. And this is just a ploy that car dealers and furniture dealers and people like that use, because they know that direct negotiation. But when you own the real estate and you're talking to the buyer, it's just buyer advantageous. Say you're asking $300,000 for your house, and the buyer says, well, will you take $285? Well, no matter what, you've got to answer that question. Yes, I will, or no, I won't. But if you stop and think about it, when you're dealing with a real estate agent, if somebody asks me, we're looking at a house, and they say, Ron, will they take $285 for this house? My response is probably going to be, would you like to make an offer on the house? And the buyer says, yeah. Now he's thinking to himself, if I can get this house for $285, I'd like to have it. So what do? I take out my contract, I write out all the information just as if we're good to go. I put in $285, I ask him for a $10,000 deposit, and write up the whole contract, have him sign it. Now, I might talk to the seller, and the seller says, heck no, I wouldn't take $299.5 for the house. But it's just better to do it that way. And by the way, make sure you understand this, even if you're selling on your own, all negotiation in real estate is done in writing. Sometimes realtors want to call up the other realtor and say, hey Ron, will they take $285? By the way, when I get calls like that on my listings, the answer is always, why don't you write that up, get a big deposit, pre-qualification letter, and submit it to us. And I'll do my best to talk the seller into it. And he might come back with, no, we won't take $299.5. We want the whole $300. But it's just a way of doing business that makes it better. So do your negotiations in writing. And now, because that direct negotiation is buyer advantageous. By the way, if you're the buyer, that's good. And buyers can benefit from what we're talking about today. Now, one of the things that I suggest to sellers all the time, and I find this amazing that anybody would do this, but they do it, is Mr. Seller's got his house for sale for $300,000. Buyer comes along and offers $298,000. Well, that's about as close to $300,000 as you can get. And if that's you, my advice is don't buy the house back for $298,000. Just take the offer. There's nothing wrong with just taking somebody's offer. Actually, I believe from experience that the shorter the negotiation, the better. In fact, the best negotiation, like that old Holiday Inn commercial, The best negotiation is no negotiation. Mr. Buyer offers $298. I've been selling real estate 40 years. I'm not good enough to tell the difference between a $298 house and a $300,000 house. I'm amazed how many sellers think they are. So they say, no, let's counter at $299. You got to be kidding. But it happens. And it also happens that Mr. Buyer walks away, says goodbye, and goes to buy something else. Because you never know what's changed since they signed that contract. He might have had a fight with his wife, or who knows, strange things happen. Now, here's another negotiating tip that'll help you. And by the way, I've been selling for 10 years when I really learned this lesson. But the lesson is this: you don't have to counter offer. Well, let me just tell you how I learned this. I had 4 houses listed that belonged to the same man. And they were all in the neighborhood of $55,000. This is many years ago. And they were all pretty much identical, except some were in a little better condition than the other. Well, I had it listed 2 or 3 weeks, and I got an offer on the first one. And I think I had them all listed for like $54,900. And the offer came in was like $48,000 on the nicest one. Not the worst one, the nicest one, of course. So the offer came in at $48,000, and the seller was up in New Jersey. And I called him on the phone, and I told him I had an offer. And he said, Ron, how much is it? I said, 48. He said, no. And he hung up in my ear. And I called him back. And he said, what do you want, Ron? And I said, we need to talk about this offer. He said, there's nothing to talk about. I'm not going to take it. I said, what do you want me to tell these people? He said, tell them to pay more. And he hung up in my ear again. And it turned out that he had a very busy business up in New Jersey, and he really didn't have time to talk to me. And later as we talked, but he told me this was basically his negotiating style. He said, I never counteroffer. He said, why should I beat my brains out thinking, well, I'll take 53. And then the guy says, well, he won't pay 53. I wasted my time figuring out that I'd take 53. And he said, I just tell people to offer more. And what a great idea, Somebody says, well, will you take less? I don't know. Make me an offer. Make me a written, here's my deposit, I'm ready to go, here's my pre-qualification letter, offer. And that makes so much sense. And if one price is not enough, ask for more and ask for more. By the way, I sold all 4 of those houses, and we never, ever counteroffered on them. Not a single time did we ever counteroffer. And I kind of adapted that as my own strategy, and I've done that plenty of times. People will say, will you take less? Well, what difference does it make if I'll take less? What are you willing to pay? So, and now also, if you're negotiating directly, and Mr. For Sale by Owner, if you're dealing directly with a buyer, that is such an advantage for you, because you can ask people all kind of questions. You can ask them how much money they got. They say, well, will you take $290? Well, is that all you can afford? Well, it's not all I can afford. Well, good, because we're trying to get $300 for this one. And so ask them questions about what they can do. Ask them if they're paying cash. Ask them if they have that cash. And don't hesitate to ask people if they have the money. I mean, if you stop and think about it, I do that. I've sold a couple of motorcycles and stuff like that. I had a motorcycle for sale. Guy came out and offered me $500 less, and I was asking for it. And I said, you got the money in your pocket? And he said, no. I said, then I'm not going to take it. And if he had said yes, I probably would have said, give me the money and right away. And so, but anyway, ask people questions. Now also, here's a bad idea. Here's a bad idea that's probably one of the most popular ideas in negotiating. The guy offers you $290 for your $300,000 house, and you suggest, well, why don't we split the difference at $295? Don't ever split the difference, because if you stop and think about it, anytime you give something in a negotiation, you should get something in a negotiation. Like, okay, I'll take $295 if you'll close within 2 weeks, or whatever's important to you. or if you'll forget about the chandelier you wanted me to leave, or whatever. And so anytime you give something, you need to get something. Well, if you say, let's split the difference, you're not getting anything. You're agreeing that you'll go to $295, whether you're going up or down, and he's not agreeing to either pay more or take less. And so don't be splitting the difference. It's just not a good negotiating technique. Also, keep this in mind as you talk to people you're negotiating with, especially if you're dealing directly like you are when you're a for sale by owner. And when you're dealing directly with people, find out what's important to them. Now, by the way, a smart realtor has already done this. A smart realtor knows they need to close real fast because school starts next week, or they need to close real fast for whatever reason. Well, closing real fast is not important to everybody, but it is to some people. And then the reverse. Maybe they don't want to close real fast. They're building a new house and they'd like to maybe have a 60-day closing. So find out what's important, and you can say, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. If y'all will close in 2 weeks, we'll take your $295 offer. And so by figuring out what's important to them and things like that. Or if you'll take it without us repairing the gizmo gazmo, then we're all set. Now, also consider this. Anytime you're selling real estate, and a lot of people don't understand this, but cash it's just wonderful. You don't have to worry about the bank turning them down. You don't have to worry about some little problem, interest rate change, the bank goes out of business, some of the things that happen, a guy gets fired from his job. None of that matters when they're paying cash. And so if somebody's willing to pay cash and ask for a small discount, please don't say no to that, because cash is just king. And also, be sure, whether you're paying cash or not paying cash, get a big escrow. The reason we have an escrow is because it's called earnest money. It's to prove that we are earnest and sincere. Well, we're earnest and sincere, and here's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that says we're earnest and sincere. And if we don't close, that money's going to be forfeited. And so that's important. Another thing that you can do is you might suggest to somebody that, yes, I'll take your less than perfect price if you will take the financial contingency out of the sales contract. Very frequently in Florida, in the standard contract we use in Florida, there's a financing contingency that says if we don't qualify for the financing, we get our $10,000 escrow deposit back. Well, you don't have to have that in there in all contracts. You do in some, but sometimes you don't have to have that in there. So take that out. And that way, if they do, for whatever reason, don't qualify, you don't really care because you're getting that escrow deposit. Now, a lot of times there's little things like they want you to leave the porch swing or something like that. Don't let deals die because of that. By the way, as a realtor, I've argued over porch swings and bird baths and swing sets in the backyard and chandeliers that are $29.95 brand new. And don't make that stuff a big deal. If it's a big deal, like you got a chandelier that's a family heirloom, take that chandelier down and get it out of the house. Don't even have it there for them to see. But if you got something that's super cool, it's a pretty good bet they're going to ask you to, will you leave the porch swing? Will you leave this? Will you leave that? So, and the last thing I'm going to suggest to you is this. And this is almost impossible to do, but the more you can do it, the better negotiator you are. Try to leave your emotions out of this. Don't get mad at the people because they offer you less than your house is worth. In fact, a good rule of thumb, whether you're buying or selling, it makes a big difference if the people like each other. I don't know about you, I've sold motorcycles, used cars, real estate to people that I just enjoyed selling it to them. And I've bought stuff from people that I just enjoyed buying it from them. They were just nice people. It was just a pleasure to do business with them. I've also bought from people that it wasn't so pleasant, but the deal worked out. So, but anyway, those are just a few tips. But when you negotiate, make the best deal you can and stick with that deal. Thanks for listening. If I can help you with anything, if you got any questions about anything, that's my phone number, 828-755-6996. If you're anywhere in the vicinity of Daytona Beach, want to buy some real estate, call me, Ron Climer. I'm at your service. Thank you so much.